Hi guys! If you clicked on this video, most likely you're stuck on which caramel is the best for achieving flawless caramel apples. So in today's Caramel Apple Masterclass, we're going on a fabulous fall adventure to compare 3 different caramel methods, especially since this is the season that you want to sell them. We will be comparing homemade versus 2 products with the pros and cons of each, plus answering some of your questions from my last caramel apple video to uncover all the troubleshooting. Also, there's a fun bonus tutorial on these super cool caramel apple pops that are a trendy alternative to cake pops. So to master that bubble-free glossy coat that's stable without sliding off your apples, be sure to keep on watching and let's create something magical! When you're looking to sell caramel apples at events such as pop-up shops, craft fairs, and farmers markets, you need a super stable recipe. So I'm going to show you something very similar to the ones you see when pumpkin picking and apple picking, but better with a homemade version. If you and your customers prefer the classic chewy caramel and something that's homemade, this method is for you. Also, the chewy caramel is very versatile and forms a firm enough shell for dipping watery fruits such as strawberries and apple pops without having a fail like this. Before dipping in the homemade caramel, it's essential to prepare your Granny Smith apples with an effective cleaning method. Removing all the wax will prevent bubbles and craters and allows the caramel to stick to the skin without sliding off. To do this effectively, I clean in 2 steps. First, I do a little bit of a pre-wash by soaking the apples in room temperature water and spraying on some veggie wash. This is what I call shampooing your apples. I spray the whole apple and lather the veggie wash thoroughly, then go back in the water to rinse just like you would shampooing your hair, and finish by drying with a towel. Squeaky clean. For step 2 of the washing process, to a pot of boiling water, you are going to add 2 tablespoons of white vinegar and 2 tablespoons of baking soda. Just be careful that baking soda will get fizzy in there. Go ahead and insert the wooden candy apple sticks before placing the apple in the boiling water for 10 seconds. Notice I'm leaving a small ring around the top. Drying the apple and dipping in an ice water bath before drying it off again. I create that ring just because I like leaving some of the pretty green color peeking through. However, if you prefer to coat the whole apple in caramel, you don't need to make that ring, so it's all up to you. The boiling water will dull the color from completely stripping that wax. To prepare apple pops for a fun treat, there's no need to follow that cleaning process since we're peeling off the skin. Instead, I'm squeezing half of a lemon into a bowl of cold water to prevent the apple pops from getting brown or discolored. Let the apples hang out in that pool of lemon water until you finish peeling and shaping all of them. It's also key for the apples to be cold, preferably in the fridge for 1 day. Start peeling a cold apple with a vegetable peeler. Removing the skin also allows you to punch through with the melon baller to form the pops easier. The skin adds a thick, bulky layer on the surface that we don't need. Now to shape the pops, I pat the apples dry and use a larger size of this melon baller. Give it a few firm twists like a cookie cutter and scoop as you turn through, digging as close to the apple as you can so it forms a full circle. As you continue, be sure to leave enough room in between without getting too close to the other cutouts. Getting too close will flatten the edge instead of leaving it round. This melon baller was super easy to use. I will be sure to link that and all the other supplies from this video down in the description box below. Once you finish scooping all the apples, it's time to insert the sticks. First, I twist a wooden candy apple stick in the center to create a hole with the pointy end so that a lollipop stick goes right through. The important tip for mushy and watery fruits like these apple pops and strawberries are to keep them cold for dipping. In my caramel strawberry video, I keep those in the fridge, but the apple pop should be stored in the freezer for 30 minutes before dipping. I don't recommend longer than that because the apples will get too mushy and watery in the center. Surprisingly, you'll find that sweetened condensed milk is the key ingredient for a stable base, which means this recipe is more similar to pre-made caramel apples from the grocery store than you think. Although homemade makes a big difference in flavor, the caramel from the store stays put and even resembles the ones sold at the apple picking stand as well. If you take a look, they look very much alike. So let's replicate those same great results. Credit for this awesome recipe is all thanks to this stay-at-home chef. Into our pot, start by melting 2 sticks of butter on medium-low heat. Another pro about the homemade caramel is that you can customize the color that you want by choosing the type of brown sugar. Once the butter is completely melted, I'm adding in 2 cups of dark brown sugar. I love that rich, deep caramel color, and if you prefer a lighter caramel, go with the light brown sugar instead. Next, pour in 1 14-ounce can of sweetened condensed milk, as well as 1 cup of light corn syrup and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. From this point on, it's super important to constantly stir the caramel mixture. Any recipe that contains sweetened condensed milk needs to be constantly stirred, scraping the sides and bottom. That is one con about the homemade. Keep an eye on it while it's stirring to look for any bubbling. Don't worry, depending on your stove, this can take time. Keep the heat down to medium and stir for as long as you need. Then clip on your candy thermometer once you spot those bubbles. And wait for the caramel to reach between 230 to 240 degrees. The consistency will get very thick, so feel free to remove anywhere in that range if you feel like it's difficult to stir since you don't want to burn it. Keep in mind, we want the caramel to slightly cool down to get rid of those bubbles, but not drop the temperature too low since the consistency is on the thicker side already. The ideal temperature for dipping is at around 190 degrees. Another tip to decrease the chance of bubbles is by rotating the pot instead of stirring the caramel. I find the more you stir, the worse the bubbles get. Always remember to prep your apples with that cleaning method for a gorgeous coat of homemade caramel. The other con I'll mention is that this caramel does take the most time to make, but it's definitely worth it and tastes incredibly delicious for my chewy caramel fans. If you've ever made grainy caramel before, with this recipe you won't have that problem since it doesn't contain any granulated sugar. Another pro that adds to all the fun is this caramel works well in a crock pot or warmer for your caramel apple bar. Some topping ideas are chocolate sprinkles, vol nonpareils, Heath toffee mix, Reese's Pieces, Butterfinger, and of course chopped peanuts. Grab your apple pops from the freezer after 30 minutes and swirl to completely cover the apple. It sets fast from being in the freezer, and a fast set is exactly what you need for watery fruits like this. Finer toppings coat the caramel the easiest. For larger toppings like Reese's Pieces, I gently press them down. If you choose thicker chocolate toppings like Butterfinger or Snickers, any candy bar really, it's more likely to melt from dipping in the warm caramel and should be eaten right away. This apple bar is a fabulous fall activity for all your guests. As for how long the apple pops last, they need to be stored in the fridge if you don't plan on eating them right away. They do hold up pretty well for a few days aesthetics-wise, but the longer time that passes, the apple won't taste as fresh. To sell, I recommend dipping them as close to pickup time as possible, just like you would with caramel strawberries. Let's talk about packaging the regular size caramel apples. The chewy caramel can be wrapped in bags or clear candy apple boxes. Over time, the bags leave lines on the surface of the caramel. Personally, I prefer the boxes, although they are more expensive. Presentation is everything when it comes to your product, but if you choose to bag them, the caramel won't slide off the apple or anything. On the other hand, if chewy caramel isn't your thing, or maybe you want something quick and easy like my abuelita, and you love a softer caramel, this method is what you're looking for. And one of the best parts is that you only need to wash the apples with a simple rinse. There's no need to prepare them with a fancy cleaning method because the soft caramel clings to the skin like a film with no issues. If you've seen my other video, I'm going to be answering some questions from there to help you. One of the most common questions I receive is if you can substitute with a different brand of Dulce de Leche besides La Lechera. Unfortunately, my answer is no, because this brand is the thickest, so you won't achieve the same result with another product. I'm sorry, my Canadian viewers, La Lechera is not sold in Canada at the moment. It's generally found in Target, Walmart, Instacart, and Amazon in the US. Another question is how many apples can you dip with a full recipe? I use 4 cans of Dulce de Leche and 3/4 a cup of heavy cream to dip approximately 9 medium-sized apples. If you want to get 1 dozen out of that, you can choose smaller apples. Now cook this on the lowest heating setting on your stove, which is simmer to keep it low and slow, and stir constantly while turning and scraping the sides to prevent scorching or burning. Although you need to work that Dulce de Leche, it doesn't take nearly as long to come to temperature as the homemade. Continue until you no longer see that thick pudding-like consistency that flops off the spoon. The consistency will be perfect and fluid enough to remove from the heat at 140 to 145 degrees. Back to some of your questions. Can this caramel be reheated, and what can you do with the extra? It can be done, however, it's not my favorite. Just like a really good steak, it's at its prime when fresh. It's okay, but not the same when it's left over, so I only suggest aiming to make the amount that you need. Feel free to cut the recipe in half with 2 cans of Dulce de Leche and 6 tablespoons of heavy cream. There are 3 tablespoons of cream added per can. However, I don't recommend making a single apple with 1 can of lechera. Some of you were asking about that. There won't be enough caramel in the pot to properly swirl and dip. Let's get ready to dip by angling the pot. Another pro about this caramel is that it's least likely to bubble even if you stir it, resulting in a clean, glossy finish. And if you happen to get a foot on the bottom, the parchment paper will remove that for you later on. Personally, this caramel method is still my go-to and all-time favorite. As long as you follow some important guidelines, it will be no fail. The homemade condensed milk recipe works and looks great. However, most of the time, I always come back to the Dulce de Leche. One of the most important takeaways of this video is that if you are planning on dipping in chocolate, that should be done about 15 to 20 minutes after dipping in caramel. So begin by twisting off the parchment. The Dulce de Leche won't be completely set yet, but you don't want to wait any longer because your countertop or tray can make the apples too cold, resulting in a cracked chocolate coating. However, if you're leaving the apples plain, store them in the fridge to firm up, and any caramels that contain dairy products should be refrigerated for health reasons. There were also questions about why did their chocolate seize? Is it because the caramel is too soft? To get to the root of that, it's the chocolate, not the caramel. For example, my chocolate here is 90 degrees. Usually that's standard for being ideal to dip berries and cake pops without white spots. However, apples need to be dipped at a lower temperature and thinned out way more than normal. If there's a pull on your chocolate, that's a sign it's too thick. I'll demo this on a plain apple without any Dulce de Leche to show you. Immediately after dipping, the elephant skin appeared on the apple. It's all about your method of tempering your chocolate. Here I thinned out my Merkins chocolate melts with coconut oil, or you can use Paramount crystals if there's any allergies. Be generous with your thinning agents for that super fluid consistency so that you can dip at 83 degrees. If you need more help with the chocolate melting method, I show step by step in the no-fail caramel apple tutorial, and it looks great. I left that striped turtleneck look by leaving some of the caramel showing. You may refrigerate your apples after decorating and dipping in chocolate. Some other concerns are that the Dulce de Leche did not firm up after an hour. Did you do anything wrong? No worries, it just needs 3 to 4 days in the fridge to be dry to the touch. However, it's a soft set caramel, not chewy. It will become firm and able to cut through with an apple slicer. However, I recommend making them a few days in advance. For that reason, I only package them in candy apple boxes with a mini cake board underneath. The final question is if the Dulce de Leche can be used for strawberries. The answer is no. Although it looks pretty and would be okay for a make-and-eat treat, it doesn't create enough of a firm shell for watery fruits. It will stick right to the silicone mat. So if you intend on keeping them for longer, stick to the homemade chewy caramel recipe. Same concept for the apple pops. Last but not least, another popular product in the caramel world is Peter's. It can be found in many local cake supply stores and online. It was available at both of my local shops. The 5-pound loaf was priced at $37.99 and 1 pound was $8.99. The cool thing is that the texture is somewhere in between, being chewy but slightly softer than the homemade condensed milk recipe. The ingredients you'll need are Peter's, butter, and your favorite flavor of coffee creamer. Mine is the Starbucks creamer in caramel macchiato. One of the cons I experienced from the first impression was that the loaf was quite difficult to cut. Now into the pot, combine half a tablespoon of butter with half a tablespoon of creamer and 1 pound of the Peter's. This product is extremely thick, so be sure to stir this while keeping the heat very low. Melting the butter and mixing the liquid in to soften the caramel makes this easier. Since the consistency is extremely thick, you may be tempted to thin it out with more creamer or butter. Unfortunately, this product is very sensitive. Adding more will cause the caramel to slide off the apple. And I don't suggest dipping at higher than 175, otherwise there are a lot of bubbles. The back of the package says 160 to 180. I find it would be very gluey and difficult to dip at 160. 175 works best for me. And it's essential to prep your apples with that cleaning method to remove the wax and ensure the caramel stays in place. Although it's hard to strike a balance with the thick consistency, the coating looks very pretty. I forgot to mention that the product is also very tasty and buttery. You may lean towards this option if you want a slightly chewy caramel that isn't homemade. However, keep in mind 1 pound only yields about 4 apples at most. Since the caramel is so thick, it doesn't stretch too far, especially for the price. That's definitely something to consider for your profits. You'll only want to fast set these by chilling 10 to 15 minutes at most. I see why the instructions indicate that, because the condensation from the fridge causes the caramel to break down and melt faster than usual. As a test, I kept these in the fridge for longer, and that definitely happens. The glossy look on these are stunning, but it was disappointing when I tested leaving them out at room temperature. The caramel started to slide off within a day, which the other methods did not do, meaning the shelf life of this caramel isn't ideal for selling at vendor events or pop-up shops. I hope you guys enjoyed all the information from this masterclass and it was helpful for you. Give this video a thumbs up if you did, and comment below if you prefer chewy caramel or soft, homemade or product. To answer the question, what is the best caramel to use for apples? It all depends on what you want to use it for to best fit your needs. But I found the Peter's caramel was the least useful because of its shorter shelf life, price, and it was the least easy to work with. It's Christina here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.